Dirty Politics, Hard Times, Book 2.
The Mill Owner's Daughter.
God help the poor, God help the poor, who on this wintry morn come forth from alleys dim and courts obscure. God help yon poor pale girl who droops forlorn, and meekly her affliction doth endure. God help her, outcast lamb, she trembling stands, all wan her lips and frozen red her hands. Her sunken eyes are modestly downcast, her night black hair streams on the fitful blast. Her bosom, passing fair, is half revealed, and oh, so cold the snow lies there congealed. Her feet benumbed, her shoes all rent and worn. God help the outcast lamb who stands forlorn. God help the poor. God help the poor. An infant's feeble wail comes from yon narrow gateway, and behold, a female crouching there so deathly pale, huddling her child to screen it from the cold. Her vesture scant, her bonnet crushed and torn, a thin shawl doth her baby dear enfold, and so she bides the ruthless gale of morn, which almost to her heart hath sent its cold. And now she sudden darts a ravening look, as one with new hot bread goes past the nook, and as the tempting load is onward borne, she weeps, God help the helpless one forlorn, God help the poor. God help the poor, behold yon famished lad, no shoes nor hose his wounded feet protect, with limping gait and look so dreamy sad, he wanders onwards, stopping to inspect each window stored with articles of food. He yearns but to enjoy one cheering meal. Oh, to the hungry palate viands rude would yield a zest the famished only feel. He now devours a crust of mouldy bread, with teeth and hands the precious boon is torn, unmindful of the storm that round his head impetuous sweeps. God help thee, child forlorn, God help the poor. God help the poor, another have I found, a bowed and venerable man is he, his slouched hat with faded crape is bound, his coat is grey, and threadbare too, I see. The rude winds seem to mock his hoary hair, his shirtless bosom to the blast is bare. Anon he turns and casts a wistful eye, and with scant napkin wipes the blinding spray, and looks around as if he fain would spy friends he had feasted in his better day. Ah, some are dead, and some have long forborne to know the poor, and he is left forlorn. God help the poor. God help the poor who in lone valleys dwell, or by far hills where whin and heather grow. Theirs is a story sad indeed to tell, yet little cares the world, and less 'twould know about the toil and want men undergo. The wearying loom doth call them up at morn, they work till worn out nature sinks to sleep. They taste, but are not fed. The snow drifts deep around the fireless cot and blocks the door. The night storm howls a dirge across the moor, and shall they perish thus, oppressed and lorn? Shall toil and famine hopeless still be borne? No, God will yet arise and help the poor. Samuel Bamford, Handloom Weaver. Unfortunately, the poor are still with us. God seems helpless. The rich could help, but they have decided not to. Chapter 1. Happy birthday, Daniel. It was a Sunday in August 1841, and young Daniel's 4th birthday. The youngster smiled at his father and walked over to him, placing his hands on his dad's knee, looking up at him with his dark brown eyes. His father returned his son's gaze for a brief moment, a grave expression on his face. The lad's eyes, his long lashes and thick dark coal black hair always reminded him of Bess, and every time he thought of his dead wife, he felt a stab of grief. It had been almost 3 years since the events leading up to Bess's death, but Daniel Ackroyd still missed his beloved. At the same time, having to rear and nurture their son had provided him with a purpose, a focus in life and a will to carry on. He loved young Daniel with a passion and was determined to provide the best possible future for him. He shook his head, as if to clear away his morbid thoughts, unwilling to allow his underlying sadness to spoil his son's happiness. He laughed good-naturedly, and, placing his hands under his child's armpits, lifted him up onto his knee and kissed him on the forehead. "My, you're a big lad, our Daniel, and getting heavier each day," he said. "Has Aunt Rose been feeding you extra without me knowing?" Young Daniel gazed back, as if to say, "That's for me to know, and you to find out, Daddy." Daniel reached across the table for the oatmeal porridge he prepared for the youngster's breakfast, and placed it before him, handing him a spoon. "Come on, eat that, lad. I'll have a cup of tea, and then we'll be off to Mary's kitchen. You look a reet swell in your Sunday best, and Auntie Rose will be looking out for you." "Why does Auntie Rose want to see me, feyther?" "'Cause it's your birthday, you daft apeth, and she'll be missing you." Irene Rose, her husband Michael O'Donnell, and her father had just finished breakfasting together in the house on Hardwick Green, in which all three now resided. "I think you'll be under pressure soon, Michael," the mill owner stated boldly, putting his copy of the Manchester Guardian to one side. Michael glanced at him, lifting his eyes from the Northern Star. "What makes you be saying that, Matthew?" "From what I've read in the paper and from my personal observations, there could very well be another downturn in trade on the way, and that can only mean new pressures to reduce wages. I think you need to be preparing the spinners for action in the near future. Charlotte and Clara informed me the other day the mill was busy, father, and you've been taking on new hands," Irene Rose intervened. "That's true enough," her father acknowledged. He smiled. "However, I was replacing operatives who'd retired or moved out of the district. We've plenty of work, but it's becoming more difficult to obtain orders. Manufacturers in Germany, Belgium and France were bound to catch up sooner or later, I suppose, and no doubt their mills will be equipped with the latest and more efficient machinery," Michael acknowledged. "You're not in serious difficulties, are you, by any chance, Matthew?" "No, not at all. Gibraltar mill's in fine fettle. We can weather any storm, at least any I can envisage at the moment. I won't be reducing wages or laying workers off. If there is a downturn, I'll just have to tighten my belt. But that's not the point, is it?" Now it was the turn of the union organiser to smile. "No, you're one on your own, Matthew Ethrow, and that's the truth of it. Other manufacturers will be using any excuse they can to impose wage cuts. There's something else you should be aware of, Michael. I was talking to some of my fellow members of the Association of Master Cotton Spinners last Wednesday. We'd just finished a meeting in King Street at the York Hotel. A few of us had retired to the lounge to relax over coffees and drinks. In comes Richard Cobden, all full of himself. Since he became MP for Stockport, it seems to have gone to his head. He reckoned he'd had a meeting with the Prime Minister." Michael and Rose pricked up their ears, both being active Chartists and political animals to their fingertips. The Tories had been returned to power earlier on that year, and Sir Robert Peel was now Prime Minister. "So what did Peel be having to say for himself?" Michael asked the mill owner. "According to Cobden, he's sympathetic to at least reducing the tariffs on imported corn, if not actually repealing the Corn Laws." "An unholy trinity," Irene Rose muttered. "What's that, Rose?" Matthew looked startled. "Cobden, Bright and Peel. Strange bedfellows, 2 radicals and a Tory, saving the 3 things in common." "Enlighten us, Rose," Michael responded. "Richard Cobden's a Bolton calico manufacturer, John Bright's a Rochdale cotton mill owner, and Sir Robert's an ex-mill owner, albeit his mill was in Tamworth, but he was born between Rochdale and Bolton in Bury. If those 3 towns keep expanding, they'll be physically joined together before too long, like Cobden, Bright and Peel seem to be." "That's only 2 things they have in common," her husband pointed out. "What's the third?" They're all either hypocrites or ignorant of basic economics, or both, the latter being more likely. Matthew chuckled. I'm not going to disagree with you. I think it's time you told us what Cobden's up to, Michael interjected. Don't let Rose be interrupting you all the time. It takes me all my perseverance and ingenuity to be getting a word in sideways, so it does. Rose screwed up her face in mock disgust. She'd never met an Irishman who didn't have the gift of the gab, and her husband was no exception to the rule. At the same time, she knew there was more than a little substance for her husband's complaint. Yes, father, tell us what happened. Cobden reckons it's time for another major campaign to repeal the Corn Laws, and he's adamant the manufacturers must mobilise their workers as part of any effort. He senses Peel's weakness and thinks the manufacturers can take advantage. His Anti-Corn Law League has commissioned its favourite propagandist, William Coote Taylor, to research the subject and its effects in the manufacturing districts. Taylor's just published a new book, The Natural History of Society. He's making a tour of speaking engagements with Cobden and Bright. They're intent on stirring things up, and they'll do anything they can to provoke the working classes into action. That seems a sensible course of action from the League's point of view, Michael pointed out. I may not agree with them, but I can hardly blame them for stepping up their campaign. A reduction in the price of corn and bread would be a godsend for them. Only if they can reduce workers' wages, Irene Rose interjected. They go around telling operatives they're campaigning to relieve their distress and how they should join them and demonstrate for repeal. They tell them they'll be rewarded with a £4 loaf for the price of a £2 loaf and a 10-hour working day, that their real enemy is the selfish landed aristocracy and the large wealthy farmers. She shook her head. You both know as well as I do that's humbug and hypocritical nonsense. The manufacturers are responsible for low wages and long hours, not the landowners. Once the Corn Laws are repealed, they'll cut wages even further. That's the only way they can reduce their export prices. To pretend otherwise is nonsense. You sound as though the aristocrats and the large farmers are the workers' friends, Matthew said wryly. Have you been reading Benjamin Disraeli? Are you in favour of an alliance between the aristocracy and the working classes against the middle class? Irene Rose recognised the humorous twinkle in her father's eyes. As mother used to say, sarcasm is the lowest form of wit and the highest form of ignorance, father dear, she replied with a grin. You know I don't mean that. Both the manufacturers and the aristos are the workers' enemies, but the manufacturers are worst, not least because they know their workers' plight intimately. The fact is, for them, the real aim is to win free trade. Aye, but Michael tried to intervene. Irene Rose wasn't giving way. Not only do the tariffs on imported corn increase their costs, but if maintained, the corn exporting countries could very well impose tariffs of their own on imported cotton goods. That's the concern of the free traders and the mill owners generally. The Corn Law issue is an argument between landowners and manufacturers, between the protectionists and the advocates of free trade. She broke off for a second, a new thought entering her head. There's another reason why the factory workers won't benefit from a reduction in corn prices. It will break many a small tenant farmer and drive down agricultural workers' wages. You're right there, Rose, Michael intervened. Depressed agricultural wages encourages new migration into the towns, increasing the number of unemployed. And that reduces factory workers' wages even further. Workers need to concentrate on ending the competition between themselves by combining in unions, she asserted. They need to fight for improved wages, shorter hours, and the charter. Matthew's eyes twinkled. His daughter never failed to surprise him. Her grasp of the issues at stake was second to none. But she'd had a good teacher in the form of the late and much lamented Bess Ackroyd. Once again, you're quite right, Rose, he agreed. However, I fear there's a new twist to the plot." "How do you mean, father?" "As the discussion proceeded, I and others pointed out the reluctance of the workers to support the Anti-Corn Law League. An idea then began to take hold that it would be easy for the mill owners to provoke widespread strike action the League could take advantage of by convincing the government the turnouts were protests against high food prices." Irene Rose looked astonished. "The workers and their unions won't fall for that. They're not stupid," she pointed out. "I know," Matthew assured them. "But if they were faced with substantial wage cuts, in the order of, say, 25%, they'd be provoked into turnouts, don't you think?" 25%? Are you being serious, Matthew?" Michael's voice betrayed his surprise. "Deadly serious. I'm not sure it will happen, or when it will happen, but it's seriously being contemplated. My guess is it will be about this time next year." "What makes you say that, father?" "I think it will be timed to coincide with two events due to take place next August, Rose. The anniversary of Peterloo and the National Chartist Convention. Both will arouse the passions of the working classes, remind them of past injuries and their need to organise. The Chartist leadership remains split between the sections of the lower middle class who didn't benefit from the Reform Act because of the property qualifications, and the trade union and working class members. The former support the aims of the Anti-Corn Law League, and many are members. I think you'll find they'll try to win the Chartist Convention to support the repeal of the Corn Laws, and thus help muddy the waters." Michael O'Donnell frowned, trying to take in Matthew's information. His father-in-law had proved to be a great help in the past. His inside knowledge was remarkable, and his ability to judge a situation and the way events were likely to unfold well tested and proven. He was also well aware that the next time the manufacturers persuaded the workers to take action in order to pursue their own nefarious ends wouldn't be the first. At the same time, he wondered why they should want to risk provoking strike action and lost production. They could organise demonstrations on a Sunday and bribe workers to take part. "Does this scenario come back to your original observation that we're facing a new downturn in trade, father?" Irene Rose asked. Matthew nodded and smiled encouragingly. "You mean the manufacturers would like to kill two birds with one stone? By provoking turnouts, shutting mills across the board, they solve the problem of overproduction and too many goods chasing too few customers, while saving wages and other overheads. Then they sell off all their surplus goods, ready to pick up where they left off when the mill hands return to work, hopefully subdued and on lower wages." She paused for a second, gathering her thoughts before continuing, encouraged by her father's nod. "At the same time, with the help of the free trade press, they warn of trouble ahead, unless the Corn Laws are repealed. They whip up the tempers of the workers, and when they finally take action, portray the strikes as an insurrectionist plot out with their control, which could turn into revolution unless the government ends the tariffs. Is that what you're really saying, father?" "More or less, Rose. I'm not saying it will definitely happen, but I know that's the way some of my fellow mill owners are thinking. Only time will tell how influential they become amongst the manufacturers generally, but I think Michael and his colleagues should be prepared for the eventuality. Forewarned is forearmed." Michael didn't respond. It sounded very much like conspiracy theory to him, but it also made sound logical sense. The old grandfather clock in the corner of the dining room struck 11, as if to signal its approval. "I think we should return to this discussion later," Irene Rose said quietly. "I promised to meet the two Daniels at Mary Upton's at 11:30, and you two gentlemen can have the pleasure of escorting me there, if you don't mind. It's young Daniel's 4th birthday, and we can bring him back here later for a special tea. Young Grace has no doubt been missing him." "You've been missing him, you mean, Rose?" Michael laughed. "We know you dote on the lad." Perhaps we should invite Grace to come with us. She does enjoy young Daniel's company, and she doesn't get many opportunities to relax outside the house," Matthew suggested. "I'm sure Coot wouldn't mind, as she doesn't have to prepare lunch for us." Irene Rose laughed. Not many people in her father's position would think of inviting their maid to enjoy the day out with them. "I think Grace has more important things planned, father," she informed him. "I spoke to her at breakfast. A young man wished to meet her to take her for a walk. She asked my permission, and I agreed to speak to Mrs. Gray on her behalf. Grace will return in time to help with Daniel's treat. In the meantime, let's not keep Daniel waiting. It is a special occasion for the lad after all."